Hello and welcome to PJNet TV. In this video segment, I call My Perspective and Comments. Folks, another busy week. I'd like to start out with the President Trump impeachment, that circus that's been going on now for months, and in some cases when it comes to Adam Schiff, for years, trying to get President Trump. And the Democrats have been trying for 3+ years, and now it's culminated in this Ukrainian circus with Adam Schiff and a company bringing their case. And folks, after this past Saturday, when President Trump's legal team came together and piece by piece told the story that the Democrats didn't tell, and a very powerful and strong presentation. What they did was they said, this is what the witnesses came forward and told you, but you didn't hear the other story. You didn't hear what Schiff and company didn't show you the other answers that were given by those witnesses. And they took each witness and they said, this is what was said, this was the question, but this isn't what you heard, and what they conveniently left out. So that was Saturday. It was only 2 hours. They could have rested their case right there, because it tore apart what Schiff and the Democrats have been trying to push with these witnesses that they handpicked to come forward. But Adam Schiff, he just won't give up. Chuck Schumer, same deal. But I'll tell you what, this Adam Schiff, he wouldn't know the truth if it hit him over the head. And he's been telling fibs, telling stories for the last 3 years about how he had evidence 3 years ago that Trump was colluding with Russia. And we all know the story at the end of that, where Mueller comes and says no collusion. So what do we have here? We have now a delay tactic. Chuck Schumer looks like he's going to play some games here in the Senate and drag this right on out, so they're not going to get a vote until the middle of the week. We'll see, folks, if he's successful. But I want to talk about some of our senators that the Democrats were hoping they would bring on board, like Pierre Delecto. And folks, if you don't know, if that name doesn't sound familiar, that's Mitt Romney's undisclosed Twitter handle. And he's already one of the wobbly senators. Well, in Romney's case, not wobbly, he just hates Trump. But he also was joined by Susan Collins. And it looks like those two may want to see more witnesses, like John Bolton. Lisa Murkowski, though, it looks like what I think took place was Mitch McConnell had to do some spine surgery. And he had a meeting with Lisa Murkowski for, I guess, some time, which is what usually Mitt or McConnell doesn't really get in like that. But he had her come to his office, and I think he performed some spine surgery to firm up her resolve in her spine. So it looks like Lisa Murkowski has already said that no witnesses. So at this point, the Republicans have the votes to say we're moving on here. No more witnesses. This circus is over, and I believe what will take place is they will say no more witnesses, and then move right into getting a vote for acquittal. Now, this could happen Saturday, but I think what's going to happen is Chuck Schumer is going to play some games. And what he wants to do is President Trump will be speaking to the nation and to Congress this week, and they want to muddle that up. They don't want a decision. So I think that's Schumer's going to try his best, but I don't know. I wouldn't pass that Mitch McConnell might have something to say about that and put a stop to it. We'll see. I'd like to talk. A lot. What you hear out of the Democrats' mouth is how bad Trump is, but I want to take a journey here and talk about some of the things that have been good and positive for President Trump. And I want to start, I didn't get a chance to last week, but the first president to speak at the March for Life. And that was powerful, and a first. And there would be people that have said they would have never thought that you would see Donald Trump representing the unborn and speaking for the unborn. I also want to talk about President Trump this week in the economy. And the NAFTA is gone. And the USMCA, US, Canada, Mexico agreement has been passed and voted on in the Senate, and so that is a positive move for our economy, for our farmers, for trade, and also movement and some things firming up there with China. One other positive positive in Trump's camp and for President Trump that took place here, I believe the beginning of this week or the last week, was the Supreme Court sided with Donald Trump regarding the having immigrants coming in and not being able to provide for themselves. And this was a big stir amongst liberals and those immigrant organizations that came against that. And what we've seen in the past, over the past 3+ years, is that President Trump would bring an initiative, a bill, and the first thing, if it didn't line up with, especially if it had to do with curtailing the illegal immigration, you'd have a lawsuit come. And it would go in the lower courts, go to the appellate. And I'll tell you, the 14th Circuit has been a thorn in conservatives' back and President Trump. But what took place was the Supreme Court, they said no, President Trump can limit and require that immigrants can provide for themselves. So what's been happening is, for instance, the highest percentages, over 73%, of those immigrants coming from Central America or Mexico, that 73% go on welfare or assistance. The Caribbean's around 51%, Africa 48%, South America 41%, and then then we have at the very bottom in the less percentages. East Asia, Europe, and South Asia. And what does that do? It there's a draw on our country. Our own people, are in many cases suffering, and you have people coming from other countries that are just as soon as they immigrate, they go right onto the welfare rolls. It's not fair. It's draining our country. And President Trump can now say, immigration's fine. Come on over. But you have to be able to support yourself. So instead of being we would like to have immigration that it's not a draw. They come over and they contribute to the strength of our nation, not to deplete our nation. That's not hard-hearted. That's not hateful. That's just saying, look, if you want to come to America, you have to provide or be able to provide for yourself. And that's really only fair. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to highlight that decision. And there were two justices that had a concurring opinion. Now you might ask, well, what is that concurring opinion? What it is that these justices agreed with President Trump, but they agreed for other reasons than what the other justices might have put forward. And I want to highlight Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch. And what they said was that, one, that they are very concerned, and I believe that they are kind of putting their foot down to these lower courts, because the game is being played. And as I had mentioned, I think 3 weeks, a month or two ago, regarding this issue of my frustration, was that the lower courts, if Trump came up with a way to secure our border or to make America great and expect those that are coming in our country are going to come in legally, the first thing you'd have is an injunction. And what these injunctions were, a lawsuit would be filed, and then you'd have this judge make a nationwide injunction. So it handcuffed President Trump and his administration. And what Thomas and Gorsuch has said is that this has to stop. And as I had mentioned before, the Supreme Court has precedent. They have made a ruling, and then months later, the lower courts, appellate, basically have been almost ignoring the Supreme Court. So they've said it in this concurring opinion that has to stop. And I'm hoping that if it doesn't, that the Supreme Court is over and there are some levers that can be pulled to bring these lower courts into in line. I'd like to talk about, I don't know if you folks have heard of campus reform, but they have been doing some great work and interviews. And what they do is they go on campuses and they talk to some of the students and ask some questions. For instance, what they've set up is they will go in and ask a question about immigration and what do they think, and who was the when it comes to securing the border, do they agree with the president? And they would say, do you realize or do you know what president it was that wanted to secure the border? And they said, yeah, it was Trump, and we disagree with him on that. And they would go from one student to the other. And then the questioner would say, well, no, it really wasn't President Trump. It was President Obama that mandated that. And the students are shocked. Well, just recently here, Campus Reform asked a question Do you believe that America is a great nation? And folks, the majority of those asked said no. Some said no, it's not great. You know, others say, well, the way that they treat immigration, they treat them like crap, and one after another. And I think they had interviewed 50 or 60, and they got one college student that said that yes, America was great. And I think this comes to the point as a nation, and we see what's happening in our school system, right up to in our colleges, of American exceptionalism, and the belief that America has done good and does good in the world to help people. And there's in higher learning right now, many are socialists and many hate this country, and that teaching seems to be permeating right from grade school right up on through college. That the fact that America is great, that yes, that there are some issues and that we've faced as a nation, but we've always strived to improve ourselves. And the strides that we have made, you can look back. If some of these professors and teachers would teach the history of our nation and our founding. But troubling to hear, but not surprising, of what we're seeing coming out of colleges today, and why and how they have so easily, seems like, embracing the socialist message right now. And that's quite evident. I want to quickly talk about there's a race going on, Democratic race, and in Iowa it's coming up on Monday. And I just want to quickly talk about that they're caucusing over this weekend. And you might ask, well, what's that? They're caucusing. They don't just go into a voting booth and say, okay, I'm voting for Bernie or Biden or Warren. But over the weekend, they caucus. They come together, and the candidates and their surrogates are out trying to convince the Democratic voter on why their candidate should be at the top of the ticket, and why they should be voting for their candidate. And so what I'd like to do is just quickly, what the polls seem to be showing, that Bernie Sanders might be in the lead, and might be at a top of the polls right now. And if that's the case, Elizabeth Warren, and it has been showing in the polls that she's declining. So what I'm seeing is that if it's true, we may see Bernie taking Iowa. But the other thing that's I impressed to watch is who's coming in second, third, and even fourth. I think that the moderate wing, which is encompass Joe Biden, Mayor Pete, Amy Klobuchar, how that shakes out. If Amy Klobuchar has a relatively good caucusing over the weekend, and Mayor Pete does, that's going to draw from Joe. So if they don't, there's a chance that if Joe Biden finishes second, third, that's going to bode better for him. So I just say keep an eye on those. If Amy, I would say that if Mayor Pete or Amy Klobuchar caucuses well and they do well, then you're going to see Joe Biden in fourth or fifth, which is not the place to be. The other thing too is, I just want to touch quickly that the Democrats, are a little bit anxious right now because, folks, they realize the establishment, the Democratic establishment knows that Bernie is not going to beat Donald Trump. And maybe they're going to have to get Debbie Wasserman Schultz back out to do a hit job on Bernie and steal votes away from him like they did with getting Hillary over the hump. But this is the one thing I believe that the Democrats are really getting concerned with, the possibility that actually Bernie Sanders could win. So keep an eye on that. If Bernie, I think the implications are if Bernie Sanders has a strong showing in Iowa, he could very well do good in New Hampshire, in just the neighboring state from Vermont. So he's expected to do relatively good. I wouldn't count out Joe Biden, and it'll be curious to see if Mayor Pete gets traction or Amy Klobuchar does. If they don't, then that bodes well for Joe Biden. So we'll see. Also, next week looks to be a busy week if the Democrats still are running this crazy circus when it comes to going after President Trump. I'd also like to talk a bit, some of the accomplishments for President Trump. He met this past week, Benjamin Netanyahu, and they discussed the peace plan. Now, president after president have made this attempt. But I would say that you've got countries like Egypt, like Jordan, the Arab Emirates are on board with this peace plan. So keep an eye on that and see. I mean, this president, he's out of the box, and he's surprised many people regarding some of the decisions, and especially when it comes to the Middle East and moving our embassy to Jerusalem. So keep an eye open for those things that's happening over in Israel, and pray for the peace of Israel. And that's my perspective and comment.